In 1987, Neil Golightly was a 29-year-old lieutenant in the US Navy. But he wrote an article that's haunting him today. It sounds ridiculous, but this is where we are with current cancel culture. The article was titled No Right to Fight. It was published in Proceedings magazine, which in turn was published by the US Naval Institute. And because of this article, which talked about how he didn't think that women should be in combat roles in the US military, because of that article, the leftist outrage mob has been trying to get him fired from his job as head of communications at Boeing Corporation. I'll tell you something. The Neil from 33 years ago was right. It is the older Neil that is more of a problem because he's the one who just cowered before the leftist outrage mob and issued his resignation, which was promptly accepted by the people at Boeing. Frankly, if I had to guess, I would say that his employer also encouraged the resignation. You know how it works. But I don't have any proof for that. It's just what usually happens. Now, I can make arguments about why I agree with the fact that women shouldn't be in combat roles in the military, but what I'd like to do instead is focus on why he thought so. I've done videos before about why I think that putting women in combat situations is a bad idea, but his article from 33 years ago was actually remarkably tepid, but also very fact-based. And it doesn't matter. To the cancel culture that we live in today, it doesn't matter how fact-based, how reasoned, how calm, how rational you are. If you say something with which they disagree, they will set out to destroy you, even if it was just an article that you wrote over 30 years ago. It doesn't matter. And that's the problem. They are now more virulent than at any point in history. I think a big part of that is because they're used to winning. They're used to people not pushing back. They're used to people resigning because, they pitched a fit because they made enough phone calls to an employer, for example. So few people stand up to them, and it's part of the problem. Anyway, Neil wrote that, and I quote, "Men are emotionally sustained by the cohesive bonds forged in combat," unquote. Essentially saying that when men are together in combat, there is a brotherly bond that occurs between them that's totally different from what would happen if you had a man and a woman beside each other fighting off an enemy. When you have a man and a woman, the instinct is for the man to protect the woman, whereas if you have two men, they fight side by side for each other's lives. It's a very different dynamic, and it's a dynamic that's destroyed when you start putting women into combat roles. Now, Neil at the time said that he thought that women should be working in the private sector if they so wished. He encouraged it. He said that he felt, and this was an example he gave, that women should have equal access to Ford, IBM, or Congress, and that it was imperative that they have that access in a society dedicated to the free pursuit of happiness. And I agree in the sense that I think people should have the access, the opportunity. I don't think that corporations should, provide extra help to force women into positions that they're not qualified for. I think that's insulting and offensive and ends up with women being miserable in the end. But in any case, Neil pushed for that. He pushed for women having equal opportunities in these other areas, including women in Congress, which I would argue hasn't really worked out that well for us if you look at it. When you look at the voting record too, also doesn't look that great for women. But anyway, I digress. He also pointed out how the appearance of weakness of a fighting force makes it more likely that an aggressor would attack. In other words, if you have a mixed co-ed male and female fighting force in the military, and your aggressor is deciding whether or not to attack, they're more likely to attack if they think that you're weak, which you are more vulnerable if you have women inside of your combat unit. Those other people are also more likely to attack more aggressively because they have higher morale, because they think they're more likely to win, because they think that you're weak. This stuff matters. I mean, we're talking about the military, after all, and we're talking about, assumably, the defense of the nation. Right? And also, it's like before you go into battle, in such a scenario, the men and women on our side would have already lost this psychological battle that's important. You want the enemy to be intimidated, not your side. The morale of armed forces is hugely important, and you can read it in any basically military work throughout history. You know, you really can. The morale matters, and the morale impact of women in the ranks makes it more likely to lose a conflict. For example, say you do have this mixed force of men and women, and they're going up against a really aggressive, perhaps hyper-masculine force of Middle Easterners, let's say. You know, it paints a picture, right? You see the difference there? If you've got the hyper-masculine on one side, and then you've got the men and women troops on the other side, there's a psychological difference. I think you probably get it. You would feel more vulnerable in the male-female mixed group, and you, in fact, are more vulnerable. Truly, you are. But also what he said, and I think this is maybe one of the reasons that the outrage mob was so outraged. I'm just going to go ahead and quote it for you because I don't think I can do it justice otherwise. He said, quote, "But to argue, in the face of the realities of military life, that a woman should bear arms if she so desires, is to make the self-defeating argument that the privileges of a given individual are more important than the defense of the society that affords him or her those privileges." Unquote. In other words, military service isn't about the individual. It's not about what you want. And many of the women who want to enter military service or who want to enter combat roles do so with disregard for whether it actually helps or hurts the unit that they enter. I mean, this is the military. It is the defense of our society, of our civilization. And thus, it's not like entering the private sector, entering some business, and if you fail, you fail. Women weaken military units. The Marines even did a study showing that if you put women into these what would otherwise be all-male units, they do less well in every regard. They're also much more likely to get injured, to have hygiene problems, and so on. It's the female body is intrinsically different from the male body. That's just all there is to it. So it's not about what this individual, maybe feminist, maybe more masculine than average woman wants. It's about, or should be, in this particular case, what's best for society. And the truth is that she, that woman, makes the greater military more vulnerable. These were points that Neil made 33 years ago. They were good points. He was right. Neil was right then. And the truth is that he's right now. It's just that men nowadays can't get away with saying it. And that's tragic because we should always be able to say the truth. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.